Isaiah chapter 2 is where we pick up tonight. In Isaiah chapter 1, God gave His assessment of how He saw the nation of the southern kingdom of Judah. And it wasn't a very pretty picture that He laid out in what they had become. And then in chapter 2, He begins to prophesy, God does through Isaiah, concerning the millennial reign, the coming 1,000-year reign of the Lord Jesus. One of the characteristics of the book of Isaiah that I really like is that God, He just wails on these people, they need it. He just couldn't. He did everything He could to get their attention, and you just couldn't be any more direct than He was with them. And it's almost as if He could only lay it out so long, He could only deal with the bad news so much before He'd finally even Himself have to pull Himself up and almost encourage Himself in the fact that man's rebellion isn't going to go on forever in this world. And so constantly that the strong rebuke of the people in those prophecies, and then like on a 90-degree turn, He begins to talk about the millennium. He begins to talk about when His Son is going to rule and reign on this earth with a rod of iron. No unrighteousness is going to be allowed. It just isn't going to be allowed. And so it's just like He goes, okay, that's all I can take. I can't takes no more, stands no more. And then He just, boom, I've got to lay out some good news. And I think it's not only as it relates to Him, but as it relates to the listener, to the reader. You read through here and it's just like, it's overwhelming. And then boom, in comes this encouragement. Yeah, that's right. It's not always going to be this way. And so He begins to talk about the government of Jesus Christ. And of course, Jesus, following the Great Tribulation, is going to rule and reign on the earth. We're going to rule and reign with Him as believers for 1,000 years. And then just when you think it can't get any better, it does get better. He creates a new heaven and a new earth. But the encouragement that it's not always going to be this way. And I'll tell you, I really need to be reminded of that as a believer. I really need the encouragement that one day He's going to burn away the sin on this earth, and He is going to establish a reign here that only righteousness will endure. And I'll tell you, the Lord knows that we need it. Not that I look at the world. I never look at the world. I never look at the world and look at it and say, that's something that I'm completely incapable of apart from the Lord. I'll tell you, I'm capable of anything apart from the Lord. My heart is worse than anything I ever do or anything I ever think. And so it's not with a haughtiness, it's not with a desire that, there would be destruction of lives or any of those kinds of things, or pride or seeing myself above. But it's just that all of the pain, all of the rebellion, all of the other, that just would come to an end. And that there would be that perfect submission to that perfect love of the Lord Jesus. And the Lord knows that we need that. In fact, He taught us in that prayer that He taught His disciples to pray daily. He taught us to pray in this manner. Pray, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. And then what's next? Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. How nice it is to begin the day praying that prayer and to be able to cry that out. Lord, Thy kingdom come, and may Your will be done on earth just the way it's being done in heaven right now. And I need that perspective. And I need to know that He's going to do it someday. And so the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be on top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations will flow to it. In that culture, they would take, if you were in a village, the highest hill in the village, or the highest point in the village, is where they would put their temples to their false gods and all of those kinds of things. And so here God is declaring here that the day is going to come in the latter days where His house is going to be the highest. There'll be no competition from the idolatry of man. And so the day is coming when His house is going to be established on the top of the mountains, no competition, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. A day when man's rebellion is going to be over, and only what is right will be done. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord." Wouldn't that be nice? Now, I don't know where you're going to be ruling and reigning during the millennial reign. The Bible says we'll rule with Him. I mean, it's not in the sense that we're equal to Him or anything, but we'll serve. And so, we'll have different areas of the world that we'll have. I hope I get out of Modesto in the millennium. I mean, I like Modesto because you're here. Take you away and, neat mall and all, but, I got my sights on Pacific Grove. That's where I want to be in the millennium. Like where it gets a little cool once in a while in the summer. A little fog, some waves. Anyway. So, where am I here? So, but there's going to be that deal. I don't know how it's going to happen, but we're going to have contact with one another, and they're in the area of Jerusalem. I don't know how the coming and going is going to be, but there's going to be many people who will say, "Come and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and He will teach us His ways, and we will walk in His paths." Now, I really like that because it says, He will teach us His ways. Now, imagine going to a Bible study that He teaches. You ever long for an audio tape of, the Road to Emmaus sermon? Any sermon, actually, that the Lord... how priceless would that be? You got like a 2-minute tape. It'd be too long for Him. He always preached short. And so maybe a 30-minute tape. And so really, wouldn't it be something to hear Him preach? Now, one of the preachers that is my favorite is G. Campbell Morgan. And there are only 2 tapes in existence by him that I know of. And I only own one. They tell me there's a second one. I search high and low. I can't find it. But they tell me that it is. There's only 2. And so, boy, with only 2, how precious that makes it. Now, one of the things that G. Campbell Morgan, he didn't like to be taped. He didn't like it. He didn't like the technology. He just didn't like to be taped. Now, I think one of the reasons was that he would continually repeat his messages when he would travel. And so one of the things, you go someplace, and if you deliver a message and it gets taped, it can be all over the place. And now, rats, you got to get another good one together, and everything. And so then you could just kind of go all over and, 7 suits, 7 sermons, and travel and have a great time. I'm not saying that he was that way, but it was interesting that there was a point in time in his life where he got up and he introduced one of his sermons by saying, this is the 103rd time that I'll be preaching this sermon. Now, you can't be taping all your stuff and get a chance to do that. But imagine it's valuable. You say, I wish I had a tape of Spurgeon or whoever it might be. One day we're going to hear the Lord Jesus Himself teach. The disciples won't be able to brag about that for eternity. We'll get to hear it too. And then, not only will He teach, but everyone will walk in His paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And He shall judge between nations, and He shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, a sword being a weapon, plowshare, a device for agriculture. Their spears, again weaponry, into pruning hooks, which is agricultural related. And nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and neither shall they learn war anymore. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray. Imagine, no more wars. No more wars. I was driving yesterday in my truck, and remember the famous picture out of Vietnam where the young girl was fleeing the village following the napalm attack and became world famous, and she's established an organization to help victims of war around the world. And they were interviewing her as she was talking, and she said, there's so many victims all around the world, and not all of them got their picture taken. Not all of them got their picture taken. And how many victims around the world? I picked up the newspaper this week and reading there in Croatia and Serbia and all, and 2 men. One of them, confessed to shooting 85 people, killed them dead. And women, children tumbling out of buildings, just shot them dead, just like nothing. Another one, 70-some, and all. The day's coming when all that money that's going into weaponry, and I'll tell you, it's one of the most depressing things in the world, is to track the amount of money that is still going into weaponry in this world, and how especially the Middle East and the Arab countries are arming themselves in this day. It is astounding what is happening. You just got dynamite loading up over there as it relates to the last days. And so, but one day it'll be done. There'll be no more wars. Wouldn't that be great? You just want to sit there and you want to breathe that verse in a little bit. But it's going to take the Lord's return for that to be true. He says in verse 5, as he returns now in rebuking the people, he said, O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord, for you have forsaken, and then concerning God, for you have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob. And here's the reasons why: because they are filled with eastern ways. They were filled with the ways of their neighbors. And so here's what they had traded God for. In other words, they had rejected God. What did they get in exchange? Eastern wisdom, wisdom, foreign wisdom. Well, you're not going to top God's wisdom for anybody's wisdom. And then they exchanged God for the soothsayers, like the Philistines. And the soothsayers were just diviners. The Philistines were known for this. They were diviners, means by which to tell the future. Well, what do you want to go to a soothsayer when God will tell you the future? He's told us the future right in His book. You say, I want to know more. You don't want to know more. You don't want to know more. He told us what we need to know. You don't need to know anymore. And so they went to the soothsayers like the Philistines, and they are pleased with the children of foreigners, influenced by the foreigners, and their land is also full of silver and gold. There's no end to their treasures. Their land is also full of horses, and there is no end to their chariots. And so they traded God in for money. They began to compromise their walk with the Lord for money. Let me tell you something. There is nothing in all of the world, and not all of the world all put together, that is worth your relationship with the Lord. It's worth the relationship with your Lord. We get more enjoyment out of one day of walking with Him than people that own all the vast amounts of this world. They traded God in for money. They compromised. Now, God, if He wants to bless you with money and use you as a channel as it relates to the body of Christ, that's another thing entirely, that you're not trading God in for that kind of a thing. And then He said, rebuke them for their idolatry. Their land is also full of idols, the worship of the work of their own hands. And that's what idolatry is the worship of the creation, the created thing. That's what idolatry is. The worship of anything that is created is idolatry. It's foolish to worship the creation. The smart thing is to worship the Creator, who's always greater than the creation. And so they began to worship the work of their hands. And we think, those foolish ancient people, with their little idols and their little wooden, idols and their stone idols and their carved this and carved that. A car can be as great an idol. These fancy things in terms of technology today can be as great an idol as any idol that they have had in those days. The worship of any created thing which they've made, which their own fingers have made, people bow down, and each man humbles himself. Therefore, do not forgive them. And then God, as He speaks about what they have traded Him in for, And he begins to talk about the judgment that's going to come upon them because of that. And it's inevitable that judgment is going to come upon a people that make that kind of an exchange. And so there's a humbling that's going to come. And he says, enter into the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord and the glory of His majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled. I want to be humbled. The haughtiness of man shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. Now, the near fulfillment of this prophecy through Isaiah would be through the Assyrians when they would come into Judah, but they wouldn't take Jerusalem. So they'd come in and pillage the land, and there'd be the humbling coming from that. Later, the Babylonians would take Jerusalem itself. There would be a humbling because of that. But here is a humbling that's, as we read through it, has an even greater fulfillment in the last days, talking about the great tribulation when God pours His wrath out upon a Christ-rejecting world. We look at the world now and we think it's pretty rough. But all we see around us today is just the sowing and reaping process. We haven't even begun to see God's wrath poured out on this earth. And so there's going to be a day when He does that, and He's going to humble man in that day. There won't be any mocking of God. All of the comedians on the Comedy Channel, we'll see how funny they are on that day. And all of the mocking of God and the journalism and journalistic endeavors and all of this kind of stuff, just say, can I check in with you during the Great Tribulation? If I'm able to, I'll be in heaven. But if I'm able to, can I email you and see how things are going? See how good the jokes are, are coming out as it relates to the Lord and mocking His people. It's not going to be funny one day. It's not going to be funny at all. For the day of the Lord of hosts shall come upon, and notice that next word, everything proud and lofty. Every bit of man's pride is going to be humbled in that great tribulation. God is going to humble it completely. Oh, man. And upon everything lifted up, and it shall be brought low. Upon all of the cedars of Lebanon that are high and lifted up, and upon the oaks of Bashan, and upon all the high mountains, and upon all the hills that are lifted up, upon every high tower, and upon every fortified wall, and upon all of the ships of Tarshish, and upon all of the beautiful sloops. And so you have, he's likening these trees probably to leaders. You have military leaders, you have kings, you have political leaders, and you've got commercial leaders. He says it's all going to get humbled. Verse 17, the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day, but the idols He shall utterly abolish. And now he begins to talk about what's going to happen with idolatry and the folly of worshiping an idol. The folly of living my life. And we talk about worship. What is a person's God? A person's God is the master passion of their life. The master passion of my life. So whatever that is, we say, well, boy, I love the Lord Jesus and I love this and all. But what's the master passion of my life? And if it is an idol, if it's some created thing, then he says, don't, trust in that. Don't give yourself to that, because this is how they end up. This is the fate of idols. They're all going to be utterly abolished, verse 18. And then verse 19, they shall go into the holes of the rocks, the people, and into the caves of the earth, from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of His majesty, when He arises to shake the earth mightily. God's going to arise, and He's going to shake the earth mightily. In the book of Hebrews chapter 12, it says that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. For what purpose? God's going to shake it. He's going to shake this world. Everything that can be shaken, He's going to shake in order to reveal what can't be shaken. Only what's built on God is going to last as He pours out His judgment and His wrath. And so everything else is going to collapse. It doesn't matter how many people are engaged in it or how secure that it looks like. Anything built on rebellion to God or the worship of any other thing is ultimately going to be shaken down when God shakes this earth. And in that day, a man will cast away his idols of silver and his idols of gold. Can't even sell it. Can't even give it away. That's what it's going to be worth nothing in that day, in which they made each for himself to worship. Sad when you make your own God. You know, you get your little Mr. Potato Head and everything. Hey, you know, you get a little, what kind of ear should we put on in there, you know, and everything. And you, oh, you know, kind of a thing. You know, look at the head of that potato head right there. You know. See, I mean, and then make it out of gold if you want. It's as stupid as a potato head. Doesn't make any sense at all. So you make it to worship. What are they going to do? They're going to throw it to the moles and the bats. The bats aren't going to waste any time. They're trying to survive. And so it's going to be just thrown away to go into the clefts of the rocks. They're just going to junk all this stuff and into the crags of the rugged rocks from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of His majesty when He arises to shake the earth mightily. He's going to rise up and He's going to shake the earth mightily. And there is glory in His judgment of sin. There's glory in it. It's part of His glory. And then God gives counsel in light of the fact that this is what's going to happen to rebellious man and going to happen to his idols. God speaks and says, sever yourselves from such a man. Sever yourselves from people that live for these things. God tells us in the New Testament, come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and I'll be a father to you. You know, to come out from among them and be separate, I mean, it costs us relationships in our lives. It can cost us promotion. It can cost us a lot of things not to compromise for the Lord today. And we say, well, what's in it for me as I do that? Who's going to take care of me? And God says, I'll be a father to you. I'll be a father to you. Well, what's going to happen to my this or to my that? Maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need that. Maybe it's best that I don't have that in this day. But He says, come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. Sever yourself from such a man. Don't be influenced by these kinds of people. Get away from them, whose breath is in his nostrils, for of what account is he? Don't be impressed by them. Don't be influenced by them in any way. Don't think that there's something great. They breathe right through their nose the same way you breathe through your nose. And so He's saying, don't trust in anyone that their next breath is in their nostrils. In other words, they can't even guarantee they'll take the next breath. Oh boy, they talk all big and blaspheme all big and all of that. And God says they don't know that they're going to have another breath inside of their nostrils. And so make God your friend, for of what account is He? And so here's the prophet Isaiah, and he's not at all impressed with man. He's not all impressed with man. I'll tell you, I'm not all impressed with man. I'm not at all impressed with myself. I'm impressed with what God will do in men and women. That's what I'm impressed with. But all of this, our next breath is, in our nostrils. Oh, we think we're so great, we're so whatever. But God says, of what account is he? What is he for all of his big words and his rebellion against God? Chapter 3, he continues to talk about the judgment that's going to come and the anarchies that's going to come as a result of rebelling against God. He said, for behold, the Lord of hosts, takes away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stock and the store, the whole supply of bread and the whole supply of water. Everything they compromised their relationship with God in order to gain, they were going to lose. They were going to lose. That's true of every person in this room. That's true of every person in this world that ever compromises their walk with the Lord for something. You will lose it. You may even hold it for the entirety of your life, but you'll lose it in that last breath. You'll lose it. It's not worth it. And so God was telling them, you've traded me in for something that's going to be gone in a second someday. And so it was going to be the case. He said, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the honorable man, the counselor and the skillful artisan and the expert enchanter. And so he's saying all of your leaders are going to be killed or they're going to be captured. All of these men that you think are so great and they're going to get you out of trouble. He said another consequence of rebellion is going to be social anarchy. I'll give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. The people will be oppressed, and everyone by another, and everyone by his neighbor. The child shall be insolent toward the elder. There won't be any respect, and the base towards the honorable. In other words, just social anarchy. Nobody's going to respect anyone. It's going to be, we're survival of the fittest in the sense of people going right down to the level of an animal and in their treatment of one another. And so when that judgment came, that's what happened. I wouldn't. What do you think the lines will be like in the supermarket? If things ever got rough here. No, after you. Oh, no, you take the last. No, oh man, I don't want to be there. So that's why we've got a year's supply of food and guns like crazy. Guns, big guns. We got guns. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of rounds we have. I mean, Teflon-tipped bullets, we got it. Don't mess with our cream corn. Don't even get close to our house. I'm not just kidding. We only have what we have in our house, and so, don't be messing with us anyway. It relates to that. And when all of this happens, when a man takes hold of his brother in the house of his father, saying, "You have clothing, you be our ruler." That's all it's going to take. They're going to say they're going to establish the king. Hey, you got a jacket, you be the king. You got the nicest jacket, you be the king. And let these ruins be under your hand. You be the king of this wasteland. And in that day, the guy they try to make king is going to say, "I can't cure your ills, for in my house I don't have food or clothing. How can I take care of a nation? And do not make me the ruler of your people." Things will get so bad that no one will want any power. Nobody will want anything to rule over a single other life, much less a city. Even God's people in their rebellion to Him. For Jerusalem stumbled, and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord. And that's always what follows, is a stumbling and a falling when I turn against the Lord, to provoke the glory or the eyes of His glory. The look of their countenance witnesses against them. I mean, sin was written on their face. They were so involved in it, and they declare their sin as Sodom. In other words, they were open in their sin. They do not hide it. Woe to their soul, for they have brought evil upon themselves. By the time God pours out His judgment, it is the last thing He ever wants to do. And when He does it, it's because people have brought it on themselves. I mean, listen, when you take and you put your only begotten Son between every human being and hell, you can't do more than that. And then send your Spirit to bring people face to face with the gospel. You can't do more than He's done and not touch our freedom to choose. Verse 10. He encourages the righteous in all of this, and this had to be rough for them to hear Isaiah speaking. And he said, "Say to the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings." And so God promises the righteous in judgment. He's going to take care of them. "Woe to the wicked! It shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, that those who lead you cause you to err and destroy the way of your paths." And so he pronounces his woe upon the wicked. And now he begins to condemn the leaders for their oppression. The Lord stands up to plead and stands to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders of His people and His princes. These are the leaders. And he said, "For you have eaten up the vineyard," talking about His people, His nation. "You've eaten up the vineyard. You didn't give anything to me on things. You ate, took everything for yourself. The plunder of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, says the Lord of hosts?" They were absolutely fearless as it related to God. And they just took God's people and they just soaked them every chance they could till the people had nothing even to eat, and yet all of their wealth ended up in the houses of these rulers. Instead of serving the people, they saw the people as just a means of supplying them with wealth, and God rebukes that, and He judges that, whether in the political arena as it relates to the children of Israel, certainly in the spiritual arena as it relates to the body of Christ. In the ministry, we are here to serve the people and to love the people. I remember the first time I ever heard, as a Christian, I was a pastor for a while, and the first time I ever heard people referred to as giving units. I was flabbergasted. I'm still stunned that could be thought, let alone that could be said, giving units. And that reminds me of another thing where one time I think I've mentioned it before, one time I was at a little kind of a luncheon kind of a deal, and here I was just, little Joe Schmo down there in the corner of 10th and F, Calvary Chapel in Modesto, and I had my little styrofoam plate, and looks like a good macaroni salad, doesn't it? Yeah, sure does. Boy, they pulled out all the stops today, didn't they? And all that, and I'm heading through, and a guy in front of me, I started a conversation with him, and he asked where I pastored, or I ministered. I said, well, Calvary Chapel here in Modesto, and he said, oh, that's a low church, isn't it? That's the first time I'd heard that, too. It's a low church. Just a second, sir. Well, I turn green and crush your head. A low church. Hey, we're not much, but I'm not used to being talked to by it like that. And what he meant was, high church is high liturgy and a lot of the ritual and all that. Low church is a more casual church. Oh, yeah, I guess we are a low church, and then I understood kind of like what it was. But in the service, nobody's going to last too long in the service to the Lord unless there's the recognition that we're to serve one another. That's what God calls us to do. We're not to make merchandise of one another. He said, moreover, the Lord says, as He begins to deal with the immoral women there in Zion, Jerusalem, He said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and they walk with outstretched necks. And so they just got that little haughty kind of a stretched neck walk. And wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go. That little short step thing. Sometimes they do. And the idea is that really that they're kind of showing themselves off. Now, in that culture, so many layers of clothing, it was impossible really to communicate. Today, women have ways of communicating what they are physically in a lot of ways. With all of the garb that was on them, their way of doing that would be to mince and these quick little steps and all, and then it would let you know what kind of a woman they were. And so here they were really just kind of tormenting the guys and all, and immoral, and making a jingling with their feet, and therefore the Lord will strike with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will uncover their secret parts. And so here they were tempting the men and immoral and trying to attract the men, and had become loose in that kind of a way. And then God said their influence was to be a godly influence within the culture, and it wasn't a godly influence anymore. And so they were a part of the problem. God said, you're going to be taken captive, and then you're going to be uncovered. Because women, of course, were dealt ruthlessly in those days. And so when he talks about them being uncovered, they're probably taken into captivity and half naked in that, just as they took the men, in much the same way. It's so important for Christian women to heed what Peter says and that is that our beauty should not be the emphasis upon the outward beauty, but upon the inward beauty. And if God has made you outwardly beautiful, that's wonderful. Keep that to you and your husband and your future husband, or whatever, you're not married yet. Peter wrote, and he said, "Do not let your beauty be that outward adorning of arranging of hair, the wearing of gold, or the putting on of fine apparel, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible ornament of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of the Lord." They were using their body and using their beauty to elicit lust and draw attention to themselves. And he's not talking about the world. He's talking about God's people here. Paul writes to Timothy, and he said, "Therefore I desire that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. And like manner also women adorn themselves in modest apparel," modest being defined as covering everything and not covering it too tightly, "with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works." And so, the whole thing has collapsed. The men have collapsed. The women have, collapsed in their roles. Verse 18, "And in that day the Lord will take away the finery, the jingling anklets that they wore on their ankles, the scarves and the crescents, the pendants and the bracelets and the veils, the headdresses and the leg ornaments and the headbands, the perfume boxes, the charms and the rings and the nose rings, the festal apparel and the mantles, the outer garments, the purses and the mirrors." There's got Mrs. Marcos here. "The fine linen and the turbans and the robes." And the sad thing is, you've got a whole group of women that are totally, all they're into is jewelry and fashion. And the whole world and their whole country is about to go down the tubes. Now, there's nothing wrong with having jewelry. There's nothing wrong with being attractive. There's nothing wrong with fashion in a Christian woman. But there has to be, that can't be the master passion of my life. I have to understand, what is God doing? What's going on in the world that I'm in and are going on around me, so that I can be an influence that's a healthy influence. And so it can't be living after, queen fashion. And certainly not in these days in that way. How many women taken away from their ministries by these kinds of things? We can't afford it. We can't afford to lose that many people and that much influence. "And so it shall be, instead of a sweet smell, perfume, there's going to be a stench, body odor, because they're going to be refugees. Instead of a sash, there's going to be a rope. Instead of well-set hair, baldness. Instead of a rich robe, a girding of sackcloth, and branding instead of beauty. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in the war. Her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit on the ground. And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own food and wear our own apparel." In other words, you don't have to feed and clothe us. "Only let us be called by your name. Marry us so that we don't remain unmarried and childless, to take away our reproach." And in other words, the day will come where there'll be no more men to lure. And they'll have difficulty, in luring a man, because they got things, all backwards. Verse 2. "In that day the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious." And now it's like it's only so much he can take. And now he heads into the kingdom age again. He's going to talk about when Jerusalem repents and turns around, and when Jerusalem will have a fresh appreciation for his holiness, following their judgment. And that's what happens, isn't it? You mess around, and all of a sudden the hammer comes down, and now there's that fresh appreciation for the holiness of God. And it's a good thing when that happens. And so, "In that day the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious," and probably talking about the Messiah here as he develops a little more fully in Jeremiah. "And the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and appealing for those of Israel who have escaped. And it shall come to pass that he who is left in Zion and he who remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who is recorded among the living in Jerusalem, when the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, purged the blood of Jerusalem from her midst, by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. Then the Lord will create above every dwelling place of Mount Zion, speaking of Jerusalem, and above her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day and a shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory there will be a covering, and there will be a tabernacle for shade in the daytime from the heat, for a place of refuge, and for a shelter from storm and from rain. Chapter 5, God likens Israel to a vineyard. He said, now let me sing to my well-beloved. And so here is Isaiah. I don't know if he actually sings this prophecy. He may very well do it. But it's a song that is sung to my well-beloved, and a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard. And so the vineyard is a reference to Israel. Very important in Isaiah chapter 5 to understand that, because when you hear Jesus talking about in the parables using the vineyard as an illustration, it virtually always is a reference to the nation of Israel. And all of the Jewish listeners would have completely understood it to be so because of Isaiah chapter 5. They understood this passage, very familiar with it. And so, the song of my beloved concerning his vineyard. And God then declares, my beloved, or concerning God, my beloved has a vineyard. God has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up and he cleared out its stones, which isn't an easy thing to do in Israel, because Israel is covered with stones, and especially Jerusalem. There's the old story of I don't know if it's true or not, but there's the old story that God gave all of the stones that were to be distributed upon the whole earth to two angels. And one angel went throughout the whole earth, spreading the stones everywhere throughout the rest of the earth. And then one angel headed right to Israel and dumped the whole load right there. And when you go to Israel, I mean, it's just stones everywhere. And so it wasn't an easy thing to clear out a vineyard of its stones. He planted it with the choicest of vine, and he built a tower in its midst, and he also made a wine press in it. So he expected the vineyard to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And so he's likening Israel to a vineyard, and he's talking about all of the things that he did to make Israel fruitful. You couldn't do anything more to make a vineyard fruitful than what this vineyard owner did as it relates to this vineyard. God could not have done anything more than he did for Israel to be fruitful for him in the world, and yet it became unfruitful due to no fault of his own, but because of their own rebellion. He expected it to bring forth good grapes, and it brought forth sour grapes, or, well, wild grapes, and it has the idea of bitter grapes or sour grapes. You ever, grabbed a cluster of grapes? I mean, you just think you got like a August Thompson seedless, it's just going to be sweet. Ooh, man. And then you put it in your mouth, and it is bitter, sour. And what do? I mean, if you're in company, you find a Kleenex or something. I mean, you got to get just makes you sick. And that's what the nation of Israel was in the mouth of God. It was a bitter taste in his mouth. That's what Judah was to them. And then God calls Judah as a witness to the fact that didn't he do all of this? He said, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, please, between me and my vineyard. Where does the fault lie? What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? And why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now, please, let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. It was his vineyard that he raised him up as a nation. He was free to do what he wanted. He said, I'll take away its hedge, it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I'll lay it waste, and it shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns, and I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain on it. That's fascinating, isn't it? Because he looks at this beautiful vineyard. It all looked really godly. Looked like, ooh, man, I mean, look at this. Outwardly looked like just what it was supposed to be. But it was just producing those bitter grapes. And God looks at it and he said, it would be better that I destroy it, than allow it to continue in the condition that it's in. And that's it. Because the people were deceiving themselves that it was all right, that this is all right, and it wasn't. And God was going to bring destruction upon the land. For the vineyard of the Lord, verse 7, of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold weeping. This was the cause of the destruction that came their way. And now Isaiah begins to pronounce 6 or 7 woes upon the southern kingdom of Judah, and he begins to talk about, the bitter fruit, the bad fruit. God has talked about the bad fruit. Now he identifies what it was that was so sour in God's mouth. He said, "Woe to those who join house to house, and who add field to field, till there is no place where they may dwell alone in the midst of the land. In my hearing, the Lord of hosts said, truly, many houses shall be desolate, great and beautiful ones without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield 1 bath, and a omer of seed shall yield 1 ephah. And 1 ephah, an omer of seed is 1/10 of an ephah. So, or the 1 ephah is 1/10 of an omer. In other words, is rebuking them related to covetousness. Covetousness. Just the gathering, the ungodly desire for more. God had spoken to them through the law of Moses, and he had said to them that all property among God's people was to be returned to its original owners on the year of Jubilee, and they weren't doing it. They were taking and using oppressive means to get the house from this person and then undercut this guy and get his house and then get this house and this house until they have gobbled up all of the land. Now they're disregarding God's law as it relates to the land being returned to the people, so there would stay a balance of wealth among the people. And so he rebukes them for their covetousness. And we have to be careful of covetousness in the United States of America, because you'd be called un-American for denouncing that sin. But Jesus said, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. Then he begins his second woe in verse 11. Woe to those who rise early in the morning. Nothing wrong with that. That they may follow intoxicating drink. Can't wait to get up and begin to party again. Who continue it until night, till wine inflames them. So talking about pleasure, talking about partying. The harp and the strings, the tambourine and the flute and wine are in their feast, but they do not regard the work of the Lord. They have no respect for the work of the Lord. Here's God's people partying, and they have no respect for the work of the Lord, nor consider the operation of His hands. Therefore, my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore, Sheol has enlarged itself, speaking of hell. Partying and pleasure, there's a lot of people that go right from the party into Sheol. They go right into hell. They say, whoa, where's the air? Here, and this. They're going to head right into the... See, what the thing that partying does and all of the pleasure and all of that is it keeps a person from stopping and thinking about what happens after this life. And then before they turn around, they're into the life after this life. And they haven't given it 30 seconds of thought in the entirety of their life. It's a great danger. And Sheol is filled with such people, and opened its mouth beyond measure, their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he who is jubilant shall descend into it. I like the fact it talks about the multitude there, because I think it's very important to understand that it doesn't matter how many people follow after sin or follow after rebellion, it's going to end up in Sheol. That's where it's going to end up. And there's something funny about Americans. We like crowds. We like crowds. We like company. We like that. And so we can have this goofy kind of an idea that as long as I'm with a big crowd that's deceived, somehow, because we're a big enough number, we'll get through this okay. It won't happen. Not on the other side of death. And so he warns concerning it. People shall be brought down, each man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled, but the Lord of hosts shall be exalted in judgment, and God who is holy shall be hallowed in righteousness. Within the lambs shall feed in their pasture, and the waste places of the fat ones strangers shall eat. And so, in other words, they're going to lose everything. They're going to lose everything, is what God is saying. He says in verse 18, as he's rebuked the covetousness, then the pleasure in the parting, and now he rebukes a total abandonment to sin. He said, woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of vanity and sin as if with a cart rope. And here are people that are so involved with sin, and so much sin characterizing their life, that they got to have a big cart, to haul all of the sin they're involved in, and big thick ropes in order to draw that cart. And he said, woe to them that say, let him, speaking of God, make speed and hasten his work, that we may see it. Or let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come, that we may know it. So they're mocking the idea of God's justice. And they're mocking the idea that God will ever judge them. And so here they are, they're totally abandoned in sin, and we see large segments of our society totally abandoned into sin, and then there comes out of that mocking. Yeah, the God of the Bible, yeah, the this, yeah, the that, all of that, and laying those things out, and so mocking it, and again, all of the comedians and stuff, but the day was coming when that judgment was going to come, and it came on that land, and it'll come on this earth. He says in verse 20, he said, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. You never know. Someday that could happen in the United States of America. When's the last time you heard something good called good? When's the last time you heard good? So somebody say, that's good. When's the last time you heard a broadcaster or a piece of journalistic work where something was declared to be good? I can't remember. And it's not just because I'm getting older. Why? Because that's a value judgment. That indicates that there is something good and there is something bad, there is something right, there is something wrong, the very thing that people do not want to acknowledge. So these terms aren't used anymore, good and bad. Nothing's good and bad. Or bad is good and good is bad, and all turned around. That's the way that it is. It's all goofy. And I'm not going to get off on that here. I'll just go crazy here if I have to be careful and keep moving here. And so they call evil good, and they call good evil. And who put darkness for light and light for darkness, and who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And so they've substituted God's standard with man's standard. And so he pronounces a woe on that. And then verse 21, he pronounces woe upon pride. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight, unteachable. And then in verse 22, his woe upon drunkenness. Woe to men mighty at drinking wine. And isn't that funny? Here's a guy or people that, their great fame to claim is that they're mighty at drinking wine. Oh boy. Let's size you up for a statue right now. Man, that's good. That's an impact for world history. And yet that sometimes is as high as people's standard is just to be known for that. Woe to men valiant for drinking intoxicating drink, the hard stuff, and who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away justice from the righteous man. Therefore, as the fire devours the rubble, the stubble, and the flame consumes the chaff, so their root shall be as rottenness, and their blossom shall ascend like dust. because they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. No respect for the word of God in the southern kingdom of Judah. And so the judgment was coming on them. And what God is talking about is all of the enemies of Judah, they were all around them. There was the Egyptians, there were the Assyrians, there were the Syrians, there was the northern kingdom of Israel itself. All of them surrounded Judah. And what Judah lost sight of in giving themselves completely to sin was they were all waiting for the day that Judah would become weak enough and they could eat him for lunch. They could eat him for lunch. Again, as we saw last week, Satan is a roaring lion walking about seeking whom he may devour. And if we get caught up into all these kinds of things and all of this and lose sight of who lies in the wings just waiting to eat you for lunch, and you can't lose sight of it, can't lose sight of the spiritual warfare. I remember I received a letter from a guy one time, real nice guy, and he was talking about ministry, and he was talking about serving in a ministry that is fruitful, and he wrote to me, and he said, how did he put it? He said, there are people in the church. He didn't come here, so he didn't know anyone by name, but he was just talking about his experience in the church. He said there's a lot of people who will come to the church to watch your relationship with the Lord and to grow in watching that relationship. And he said there's just as many people who come to watch for the day you'll fall. The day you'll fall. And they'll pick at your bones as soon as you do. And I don't believe that. I mean, I hope it's a small proportion. But the fact of the matter is that it is a ruthless spiritual warfare that we're involved in. And there's a whole group that can be waiting if we get slack and let our guard down to come in when they have an opportunity to wipe us out. Whether Samson learned it, and all kinds of examples in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. So we can't get lost in lose sight of the battle and what we're in the middle of, how high the stakes are and how ruthless our enemy is. And our enemies can be if they're given an opportunity. That's why God says, give no place to the devil. And the word place means topos. It is the smallest piece of real estate. Don't give him the smallest bit of your life. Because if it's given over to Satan, he'll take it as a foothold. He'll take it as a foothold, and he's very patient to then enlarge from there. And they lost sight of the fact that they had a lot of people that were looking to take advantage of them if they were ever given the opportunity. And so, in verse 25, therefore the anger of the Lord is aroused against his people, and he has stretched out his hand against them and stricken them, and the hills trembled. Their carcasses were as refuse in the midst of the street, and for all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. And so God, not only took his protection, was going to take his protection off of the southern kingdom of Judah, but he was going to then allow and call in even these enemies to come in and to be used by him to discipline them. He will lift up a banner to the nations from afar. He'll give them the signal. He'll whistle to them to come from the end of the earth, and surely they will come with speed, swiftly, and surely they will. No one will be weary or stumble among us. Among them, no one will slumber or sleep. I mean, they'll be in a hurry to come and get in on looting the land and humbling that nation. Nor will the belt on their loins be loosed, nor will the strap of their sandals be broken, whose arrows are sharp and all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves shall seem like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring will be like a lion. They will roar like young lions. In other words, they're going to be absolutely ruthless. Yes, they will roar, and they will lay hold of the prey, and they will carry it away safely, and no one will deliver. In that day they will roar against them like the roaring of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened by the clouds. And so God's commentary as it relates to where Judah was at was that there's no longevity in the life that they had chosen. There's no longevity in a life of rebellion to God. And so when His Word is rejected, when His Word is despised, then all that's going to come then now is going to be judgment. And one of the things that's interesting, one of the ways that God cured both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah of their idolatry was He finally just turned them over to the nations that they were so envious of. And here is the southern kingdom of Judah. In chapter 2, we're going to be dealing with Ahaz. Ahaz thought Assyria was just the greatest thing. Thought, oh, their images that they worship, all of this kind of stuff, everything like that, so impressed with it. And God finally reached a point with them and said, all right, you think what they worship is so great, so much better than me? You think that, you want your fill of what they're about? Okay, then let them be over you and get your fill. And sometimes the best cure in our lives for a particular lusting in our heart is to say, when God says, okay, go get your fill of it. Go get your fill of it. And then when you're in bondage to it and you call out to me, maybe, now you'll steer clear of it. And that's what He did. The Jews never were idolaters ever again like they were before Babylon. Babylon cured them of idolatry. Now, they had other problems, but really cured them of idolatry. And so much better not to learn, the hard way. Much better to humble ourselves before the Lord and say, no, you're right, Lord. I know that from the testimony in my life back here. I don't need to learn it by being turned over, to Satan and have him, show me the hook. He always comes in, he throws the hook in the water, and he covers the hook with a worm or something so you can't see it. And then, you grab a hold of it, and now all of a sudden you're aware of the hook. I don't want any, part of that hook. Well, we'll stop there tonight. We'll pick it up in chapter 6 next week, and I thought we might get to chapter 6 tonight, but we didn't. And absolutely, well, I don't want to head into all of that. Fascinating. Another one of my favorite passages in all of the Bible as we continue through it. Tonight we want to partake of communion. I'd like you to turn with me into the New Testament in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11.